Today, we welcome back to the Senate a man whose wisdom enriched this institution in the 4 terms that he served here. Actually, for me, it can be said that he never left. For in our archives are records of his words spoken, which are not faint echoes of the past, but powerful ideas that boom loud and clear now and in the future. In our library are many laws that bear his name as author, surpassed only in number by the laws purged of mistakes and polished to perfection by a first-rate mind he deployed in the service of the Republic. And in the present company of many of us who have become better legislators because we have been subject, or rather survived, the intellectual stress test that was JUAN, PONCE, ENRILE. He can be frugal in many things, but not with advice, and many of us here are living proof of that generosity. Whether as Senate President, gaveling the approval of bills, or as an opposition leader, pounding the veneer of proposals to expose their rotten core, JPE, as we fondly refer to him, did it with equal parts of brilliance and bravery. In fact, if he were vain and designed himself a coat of arms, bravery and brilliance would be its fitting motto. And if we look back to his examined and exciting life, these traits run through like the spine of a book telling his saga. Manong Johnny's early, hard-scrabbled existence is an epic story of the unbowed spirit. As if struggling against poverty was not enough, he had to take arms against Japanese invaders while in his teens. When peace was won, he came to Manila on a guerrilla's khaki uniform, not to boast of his war service, but because those were his only decent pair of pants at that time. In less than a decade, his talent propelled him through the fast lane, from the sleepy fishing village of Gonzaga in Cagayan to law school, to Harvard and a flourishing law career, catapulting a once social outcast into the circle of the elite. In 1966, when public service beckoned, because he was recruited by the elder Marcos, he brought his formidable intellect in the service of the people. And except for brief involuntary sabbaticals, he actually has never stopped. He actually has never stepped out of the public arena since. Never as a spectator, but always a gladiator. He is what Theodore Roosevelt called the man in the arena. He whose face is marred by dust, sweat, and blood, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of a high achievement, and who at worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat. This is a man, Mr. President, who is not only an eyewitness to the many historic events of our nation, but who actually took part and actually shaped them. And at 100, according to Ma'am Katrina, 102, late registration daw po kasi si Manong Johnny. Ewan ko kung totoo. This veteran of many battles still has a fight in him, that he is serving another tour of duty in the office of the President at 102 years old. It is a gig that dots his long career. 8 of our presidents have sought his counsel or avoided conflict with him. Si Queen Elizabeth lang siguro ang lamang sa dami ng Prime Minister na nakasalamuha. With his experience, sharp mind, and work ethic, President Marcos Jr. is lucky to have this legal heavyweight in his corner. And as Manong Johnny advanced in years, not only in looks, he is often asked what his secret to longevity is, wanting to concoct the same elixir of life. Pangarap din yan ng ating Senate President at Presiding Officer ngayon, na Senate President Pro Tem, Jinggoy Estrada. If only he had been able to discover the right formula, it would have earned him more money than the sales of our favorite Delimundo, Mr. President. In the same manner, if he had been able to monetize the memes about him, from his days in the Garden of Eve, to Samson and Delilah, to running his pet dinosaur, he will no longer be working for a paycheck, Mr. President. But let me hazard a guess to what his staying power is. In fact, it is no secret. He had frequently shared his secret to a long life, a long time ago, and it is, gusto ko, happy ka. And this is in fact in the right pursuit of happiness by every Filipino, regardless of wealth, age, creed, or religion. The right to pursue happiness without being impaired by injustice and oppression. The right to pursue happiness without being permanently crippled by social handicaps that come with birth. This is the theme that underpins all the causes and all the crusades he has fought in a life well lived. If this speech of mine were a bill, he would have introduced many amendments, I'm sure. This is because I know that he would not want to be idealized or enlarged beyond what he was in life, to borrow the lines from a famous tribute. If we call him a saint, he would be the first to vigorously oppose it, as his fidelity to truth will compel the decency in him to tone down that flattery. He does not need any, as his life is an open public record, woven into the annals of our country. But one thing is for sure, he will be kindly judged by history, as the Senate is and doing today. Because in the balance sheet of life, in the ledger of what he has done, his service trumps all. Our country, Mr. President, is better off because of a Juan Ponce Enrile. And today, I salute the man, I salute his achievements, I salute the friend that I have learned to respect and love in the many years I have served, not only in this chamber, but also in the House of Representatives. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you to our distinguished colleagues.
Thank you, Senate President Escudero, Majority Leader.
Mr. President, next to deliver a co-sponsorship speech is Senator Nancy Binay.
Senator Nancy Binay is recognized. You may proceed, ma'am.
Mr. President, esteemed colleagues, at 100 years of age and having witnessed many of the various upheavals and triumphs of our relatively young republic, Juan Valentin Fruganan Ponce Enrile is the undisputed grand old man of Philippine politics. Secretary Enrile has lived through the pivotal moments of our recent history and indeed has a distinction of becoming a valuable member of every branch of government he has served for 60 years. Naglingkod siya sa pamahalaan sa iba't ibang kapasidad, kabilang ang Senate President, Minority Leader, Representative, Finance Secretary, Justice Secretary, Defense Minister, and Presidential Legal Advisor. At sa lahat ng trabahong ito, ipinamalas niya ang kanyang natatanging galing at husay. What does Secretary Enrile's long and sterling tenure in government teach us? It is that there is always a place for those of brilliant mind, impeccable work ethic, and burning desire to serve the nation and its people. As is often said, to whom much is given, much is required, and it is to our nation's benefit that Secretary Enrile has never shirked from the destiny of service that was the mandate of his prodigious talent. Kailanman ay hindi naging madamot si Manong Johnny sa pag-alay ng kanyang sarili para sa kapakanan ng bayan at ng ating mga kababayan. Hindi rin ipinagdamot ni Manong Johnny ang kanyang oras at kaalaman upang matulungan ang mga kasama niya sa trabaho upang mapabuti din ang paglilingkod nila. Kilala si Manong Johnny sa pag-aalaga ng kapakanan ng mga empleyado niya. Dito mismo sa Senado, tinutuon niya ang pangako niyang gusto ko, happy ka. Dahil naging daan siya upang mapaganda ang benepisyong natatanggap ng mga Senate staff na hindi naman maikakailang babad sa trabaho. I am proud that not only do I share roots in Cagayan Valley with Manong Johnny, but also of the fact that I have benefited from his mentorship when I entered public service. Mula noong unang pagtakbo ko sa 2013 elections at maging noong 2019, nakasama ko siya sa pag-iikot sa bansa at pangangampanya sa ating mga kababayan. Marami akong magagandang alaala at napulot na aral sa panahong magkasama kami. Secretary Enrile's guidance has helped me navigate the early years of my career. Because of him, I have been made aware of this August Chamber's traditions and nuances. Indeed, he had even stood up as a second father, the protected leader of the minority into which I was thrust upon my election. A shield bearer even against the persecution that my family had experienced. Time will be the ultimate judge of Juan Ponce Enrile's place in our nation's narrative. Many will even say that JPE is not the perfect man, that he had his share of faults. But that is exactly what it means to be human. And what determines our greatness is our effort to overcome these faults to serve the greater good. I know that many of us here can attest that this man tried, he strived, he scraped and clawed, and used whatever gift he had to advance the welfare of this nation and its people. Ladies and gentlemen, I lend my wholehearted support to this resolution. It is only right that we celebrate our great men and women and thank them and aspire to emulate the good that they have done. Manong Johnny, ngayon gusto naman namin ikaw ang happy. Mabuhay po kayo.
Thank you, Senator Nancy. Majority Floor Leader.
President, next to deliver a co-sponsorship speech is Senator Joel Villanueva.
Senator Villanueva is recognized. You may proceed, sir.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Majority Leader. Mr. President, dear colleagues, before anything else, welcome back to your Senate, Manong Johnny. Naimbag nga rabi, ken Diyos tiyag nina apo. I stand here today humbled by the tremendous contributions of our distinguished guests to the country and to our people. At a tender age of 100 and still serving as the Chief Presidential Legal Counsel, the immortal Juan Ponce Enrile has been untiring and unwavering in his service to the Filipino people. For almost 60 years, Mr. President, he has offered his mastery of the law and legal system, his political deftness, and his vast knowledge in his capacity as a legislator and a member of the cabinet. His long, illustrious career in politics spans 8 presidential administrations, a feat that us mere mortals can only dream to achieve in this lifetime. He served as Finance Secretary and acting chairperson of the Monetary Board, Justice Secretary, Defense Secretary, Batasang Pambansa Parliamentarian, Cagayan's District Representative at the House of Representatives, and the Senator, Senate President of this August Chamber. The former Senate President served in these halls for 4 terms. He authored important measures such as the Comprehensive Tax Reform Law, and he filed the original Anti-Terrorism Bill, which became the Human Security Act. Under his leadership, the Senate passed the Comprehensive Agrarian Reform Program Extension Act, the Anti-Torture Act, and expanded Senior Citizens Act, the Anti-Child Pornography Act, the National Heritage Conservation Act, the Real Estate Investment Act, among others. Mr. President, it would take an entire Senate session to enumerate his contributions to the nation since former Senate President Enrile first joined government in 1966. His accomplishments as a legislator and his leadership as former Senate President are in equal parts admirable and overwhelmingly impressive. Many of our current and former Senate employees will always love and remember Manong Johnny because he was consistent and faithful to his favorite line na gusto ko, happy ka. And this was no mere campaign slogan, Mr. President, but a true manifestation of his commitment as a public servant who puts the welfare and interest of the public above all. Mr. President, the life and legacy of the son of Cagayan Province is the stuff of legend. And we should all consider ourselves extremely blessed to even be included as a footnote in his book. On the occasion of his 100th birthday in February this year, I happened to encounter an article listing, Mr. President, 100 things that are younger than the immortal Juan Ponce Enrile. These include television, penicillin, FM radio, canned beer, sliced bread, photocopier, the atomic bomb, Vatican City, Sputnik 1, the United Nations, Mickey Mouse, the Tidings McDuffie Law, the Philippine Commonwealth, and the list goes on, Mr. President. A century's worth of innovation, progress, and knowledge. In closing, Mr. President, please, I humbly ask that you allow me to impart one knowledge that I have learned from chapter 22 of his literal book about the best reward in life. And I quote, "To have been able to serve my country through all these decades of trials and uncertainty, and to have enjoyed the sweet and simple joys of a long and productive life is the best reward of all." Close quote. The Senate of the Philippines, the Senate of the Republic of the Philippines, gives its snappy salute to the legend that is Juan Ponce Enrile. Maraming salamat po, Senate President Enrile. Thank you, Mr. President, and may God bless us all.
Thank you, Senator Villanueva. Majority Floor Leader.
President, next to deliver a co-sponsorship speech is Senator Lauren Legarda.
Senator Legarda is recognized to deliver her co-sponsorship speech. You are recognized and you may proceed, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President, esteemed colleagues. How many people can claim to have lived over a century, not merely counting the years, but dedicating every moment to the cause of public service and shaping the very course of a nation? A century of a life lived in both the currents of history and the calm of reflection, through wars and rebuilding, crisis and triumphs, and the shifting tides of our collective story. Former Senate President Juan Ponce Enrile's service to this nation is as expansive as the archipelago we call home. As a lawyer, legislator, and statesman, he embodies the resilience of the Filipino spirit. From the intricacies of fiscal reform to the bold assertions of sovereignty, his legacy is that of an extraordinary, brilliant mind committed to the welfare of our people. In this very chamber, his leadership elevated the Senate to a space of principled and enlightened discourse. I recall with pride our shared work, among many others, on Republic Act number 10174, or the People's Survival Fund Act, a landmark piece of legislation addressing the threat of climate change, with him as the principal author when he first assumed the Senate presidency, and I as a principal sponsor during my tenure as chair of the then newly created standalone Committee on Climate Change. But before that, I had to make him watch Al Gore's documentary on An Inconvenient Truth for him to be convinced on the reality of climate change. Together, we advanced a crucial step for climate resilience, a cause we have devoted much of our lives to ensuring that the Filipino people, especially the most vulnerable, remain at the forefront of our efforts to protect and sustain our nation's future. Yet, dear colleagues, Manong Johnny's story is far more than the sum of his accomplishments. It is a story of a man who dared to weather the storms of criticism and the tempests of change. He has shown that true strength lies not in unyielding rigidity, but the ability to stand upright again and again, no matter how fierce the gale. As we honor him today, let us be reminded that the measure of our service is not in the number of years we serve, but in the depth of our contributions. Having been in the Senate since 1998, I've seen how public service demands focus and dedication to something greater than oneself, pouring ourselves into the work, listening to the struggles of our people, connecting with their hopes, and responding to their needs with urgency and determination. Leadership, after all, is about purpose, not tenure, impact, not recognition. And this, I believe, is how we truly honor former Senate President Juan Ponce Enrile, for he is not just a man who has lived a century, he is a man who has made a century count. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Legarda. Majority Floor Leader.
President, next to deliver a co-sponsorship speech is Senator Juan Miguel Zubiri. I move that he be recognized.
Senator Zubiri is recognized. You may proceed, sir.
Mr. President, today we honor a man who has been one of the most influential leaders in the history of this institution and indeed in the history of this country. Few people have played a big hand in shaping Philippine politics and history as our Manong Johnny. Of course, more commonly or more legally known as Senate President Juan Ponce Enrile. Look at every milestone event in Philippine history since the 1960s. And Manong Johnny was likely there, in front and center, and maybe running the show from the backstage. He has led the Finance Department, the Justice Department, and the Defense Department, just to name the big ones. He has also built a legacy of landmark legislation as both congressman and senator, and he has sparked a revolution. Through it all, Manong Johnny has consistently made himself indispensable for administration after administration. His sharp insight being of highest value to every sitting president since the 60s. His stellar career in public service spans more than 5 decades, and at 100 years old, his brilliance as a politician and as a public servant unmatched. He could even probably be the oldest, I'm not sure, but we could ask Guinness Book of World Records. He could be probably the oldest living, current, serving public official in the world today. I've had the great privilege of being the majority floor leader alongside the Senate when Senator Juan Ponce Enrile was the Senate President, in my first term in the Senate during the 14th Congress. And that was a distinct honor I will never forget. This was the time when Senator Jinggoy Estrada was also my boss as the Senate President Pro Tem, and we'll toil the midnight hour passing legislation, of course, with the instructions of our Senate President Enrile. He was a great boss and even a better mentor, always generous with his time and his wisdom. We used to enjoy, I don't know if you can remember this, Senate President Jinggoy, and to those who were with me at the time, we used to enjoy his caucuses with us because we would spend hours talking about historical accounts of which he was part of. These were political events, important political events, in our country's life, and he was part of them, and he was speaking firsthand from his experience. These were not stories na kwentong barbero. These were actual stories that he was part of. And he would say, and I'd love it because whenever we tell him, boss, may gusto makipagdebate sa inyo dito sa batas na ito. Ang sasabihin palagi ni Manong Johnny, anytime, makidebate ako sa kanila dahil ako nagsulat niyan 50 years ago. 30 years ago, sabi niya, ako nag-author niyan. Ako nagsulat niyan. Ako dumepensa niyan. Wala akong problema makipagdebate sa kanila. That's how good this gentleman was. And I will always remember his kind words upon my resignation in 2011, Mr. President, when he said that it was the first time within the reach of his memory that a man, a member of this chamber, chose honor ahead of himself. That was a humbling affirmation of my decision, and I carry those words with me to this very day. Throughout his long and blessed life, Manong Johnny has cemented his legacy as a peerless public servant. And today, we are honoring him. But the truth is, my dear colleagues, that it is our honor to have worked with him and learned from him throughout these years. How I wish, Manong Johnny, you could still be with us in the Senate as a senator, because now more than ever, this institution needs all the knowledge and learned discussions that you share with us throughout your life and experience as a public servant. Kaya, Mr. President, maraming salamat po that you gave us the time to honor this great man. And maraming salamat po, Manong Johnny, for a lifetime's worth of invaluable learnings. Mabuhay po si Manong Juan Ponce Enrile. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Zubiri. Majority Floor Leader.